A lot of people are often steered in specific directions by video game reviews, whether to like or to not like at all a certain game. Plenty of people decide whether to even play a game at all based on what the majority thinks. If everyone rates it at 80% or higher, it has to objectively be a good game. And then same goes for that vice versa. If a game barely reaches 50% appraisal from the many review websites, then it has to be a horrible game, right? But what if we search far down the rabbit hole of game reviews? Apparently one of the worst rated GameCube games. Reviewed negatively at release back in 2003, Batman Dark Tomorrow is considered one of the worst games for its time, and arguably the worst for the GameCube. So bad that the PS2 version was scrapped entirely for the lack of appraise. The bar goes really low for this Batman game, which I feel like is a rare sight to see for Batman games overall. But today, I tested Batman Dark Tomorrow, beating it in its entirety to try and really see how horrible it really was said to be. But I won't just play the game and bash on it relentlessly. My goal today is to try to find at least a handful of redeeming qualities. Will I actually find those redeeming qualities? I guess we'll find out, because this is apparently the worst GameCube game ever. Releasing in 2003, we have to wipe away our comparisons to the Arkham series. I love the Arkham series. Controls are the best Batman has ever felt, story is super engaging, and the powerful interpretation of Gotham and the Arkham Asylum was done masterfully. So with all of the praise aside, I had to not expect or compare Batman Dark Tomorrow to any of this. We can take an appreciative look at all the things the modern Arkham series has done, that Dark Tomorrow tried to accomplish over a decade before. See, originally Dark Tomorrow was thought up around 2001, with a very ambitious goal of being the first real open world Batman game, something never really done at this scale before then. Sadly, but unsurprisingly, it went through a slight development hell, scrapping the open world concept and going through several years of developing what they could with the inspiration around them. The developers wanted that true to the comics Batman, and almost a more realistic approach which could be new to this series overall. It wanted to be grand, and it also wanted to be a GameCube exclusive. They scaled it back multiple times, and soon we ended with the final product we have here today. Although the team would scale farther and farther down, it still achieved some new elements that would become staples in the future Batman games, including Arkham. Mainly with the variety of gadgets, stealth combat, it included some of these actual good concepts. Actually, let me not get a hold of myself. I feel like I'm defending something that isn't even in trouble yet. So let me go through why this game is considered one of the worst games ever. But I will also talk about its redeeming traits, and trust me, it has some of those. The best way to go through with this game is the good, the bad, and the ugly, a formula I like. But we'll keep the good for the end, so let me jump right into. The game throws you into a story of the Batman and our main villain's Ra's al Ghul. He initiates a plan to completely wipe the world, its biggest cities like Tokyo, Metropolis, and even Gotham, destroying what's here and starting a new world, one where he can rule. Of course, as Batman, we have to stop it. Not just for the world, but Ra's al Ghul is one of Batman's most impactful villains. We also get a quick version of Bruce's backstory, but other than that, we essentially jump right in. We start out beating a couple of robbers up, learning the fighting mechanics, and then we move across to the rooftops to learn about the bat grapple and bat cable mechanics. And this is where it already becomes bad. It does give you a slight hint on what to do, but after that, it never really tells you anything else on how to play the actual game. It wasn't clear on how to fight or how to properly use my gadgets, so for a few seconds fighting the robbers, I was just jumping around, not actually punching anything. Hey! Hey! Are you okay? Oh, I got him. What am I doing? And then with using the gadgets over the rooftops, I didn't know how to effectively use them either. No! Batman's dead. I'm Batman. I will kill every enemy in my way. Okay, I'm supposed to jump. What? To jump to that red platform. Oh my god, I made it. This is where my first issue was with the game, and rightfully so. And I assume where most of the negative reviews actually came from, the lack of knowledge. Not knowing something in games can be beneficial, rewarding if you find it out for yourself, which was a little bit of the case with this game, but mostly not knowing why or how to do basic functions in a game just because they won't tell you is just bad game design. So bad, in fact, most of the basic uses for mechanics I didn't even find out were in the game till I was almost done with the game entirely. 50% of my playthrough I was fighting enemies with punches and kicks. spamming the button till they got knocked over. Once they're knocked over, you can handcuff them, making sure they stay down so they won't fight again. What they failed to mention is that you can combo the enemies by holding left trigger and then attacking, boosting your attack speed and effectiveness overall, instead of relentlessly punching them a dozen times, making the fights drawn out longer than they have to be. The combos are essentially for fighting groups of enemies, since using my first strategy was just slow and repetitive. I love when games can give you the knowledge of how to use your abilities in the fullest of ways, but not showing me how to combo, a staple of the game. Sounds like an important feature for an action game, right? Or not showing me how to use the bat grapple and bat cable to traverse over open areas. One of Batman's most iconic tools, the bat grapple. The developers really recognize how awesome the gadget really is, so they only made one level to actually use it. The first level. You use it to move across rooftops, and then I basically never used it again other than maybe 3 quick times in the last level, making entire abilities that have so much potential and basically make up Batman. Just to never use them is such a slap on the wrist. The only 3 times I used it was the first mission, I used it quickly to climb up a castle in the late game, and then the last time I accidentally just used my bat grapple to grab a hidden sketchbook from an area I couldn't reach, which was actually kind of cool. 2 actually amazing uses of the gadget, which is also the only 2 uses of the gadget. Honestly, I found myself not needing most of the tools in this game. Or if I did, it wasn't exactly obvious, since they didn't give me a tutorial on how to properly use it. For all of the gadgets Batman has in this game, you can use the bat grapple to climb up, bat cable to swing across platforms, night vision goggles to see in dark areas, a medkit to heal up Batman of course, smoke bombs to distract, blind, or hide from enemies, batarangs to hit objects, enemies, or distract enemies, and bat cuffs to handcuff enemies on the ground so they don't get back up. And there's a finger light, which is just a flashlight, and there's also a universal tool. This is Batman's kitted out gear for the game. You can't upgrade any, which is fine, but you also don't really unlock anything else in your playthrough. What you got is what you have. We already mentioned the lackluster bat grapple, but the bat cable is even worse. You swing across rooftops or gaps and can supposedly capture enemies with it, something I tried to do but could never figure out how or when to even do it. The finger light is literally just a flashlight, but it's on your finger. It controls well, but I've never even used it on anything. And the same with the smoke bombs. I tried to hide in plain sight from a group of enemies from a smoke bomb, but they just saw right through it and shot me down, like their AI didn't even see it as a actual thing. It can be decent for distractions though, but the batarang does that and it takes down enemies when thrown at them. You can lock onto a target that way. The batarang is one of the best tools we see in this game, also destroying laser wires and again distracting enemies. Unfortunately, you don't really need to use them that much though. But the medkit is something you will use a lot since this game is older and has that annoyingly difficult sections that just all older games have to have. Damn. The night vision goggles are actually cool, you know, if I had a reason to use them. They do work though, switching you to first person mode and seeing everything in a little more detail. It is kind of nice seeing more of the world around you, but again, just a useless tool. But the last gadget is a universal tool, a device that can hack electronic locks or record and play back audio samples. And I don't recall ever using the audio sample element, but I did get through several locked doors by hacking them, which is kind of neat. But that sucks honestly. Having a good selection of famous Batman gadgets just to not use them to their potential is actually aggravating. Why not use the night vision goggles to slowly trudge through the sewer level? Or incorporate that bat cable more to trip enemies and get to new places and levels with Easter eggs. Using abilities and tools your character has to progress in game, but also problem solve in unlikely ways, makes the player fall in love with their moveset, making them feel powerful strength-wise, but with their brain too. So much untapped potential with these tools, it really makes me disappointed. But the game has more to offer, right? Its only focus isn't on the weapons and tools, it can be story. So as you progress through the story, you realize there was somewhat of a gang war, and that's what I picked up at least. Terrorizing the city is the ventriloquist and the Black Mask. As the city is burning on fire, hearing gunshots around every corner, I realized why this game was unsuccessful. I feel like a lot of players back in the day ended their playthrough around here, especially at the specific section in the streets. If you go too far out in the open into the streets, you get gunned down by enemies higher up. Unmovable enemies that cannot be taken down.
Oh, I get it. I'm dead. I get it. Okay, yeah. I don't think he's dead yet. Guys, I don't think you got me. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll try to get up now. Okay. I think I'm dead now, actually.
So obviously we can't go through without some alternative way, and after about 10 to 15 minutes, I figured I'm Batman. So I clinged to the wall, and then I accidentally found a small gap through the giant lit up corner street blocked by a bunch of burning cars and buildings. How were we supposed to know to go here? Another unfortunate flaw in the game design, not giving us almost any information. After multiple back alley areas and a great amount of enemies, we see our first boss fight. The first of many, with this one being the Black Mask. It's actually nice seeing a Batman game focus on some lesser known Batman villains. You can really tell the story was kind of written by two great people, Scott Peterson and Kenji Terada. Scott Peterson worked on some of the older Batman comics while Mr. Terada helped with Final Fantasy at that time. There are some knowledgeable people familiar with the sources of Batman, which plays positively in this game, but we're saving the good for later on, so let me get back into one of the stupidest boss fights I've ever played. The Black Mask did not ask to merely bask in the glory of my vast fist that be his black ass. Bars. Not racially intended. Black Mask was a generic mob boss fight where I just ran around dodging his bullets and beating his ass to a pulp. This is where we discover how poor the combat is in the game, and it's mainly prevalent with the bosses. After defeating the Black Mask, we later find the ventriloquist and Scarface, but it's not really much of a fight, just a cutscene of us taking him down. Still a cool interaction though. So the gang war is essentially put to rest. This is where we also get to see some of the good guys, Robin and Batgirl, for one cutscene. The game was just annoying at the start, but this game and these traits I've been listing off are inexcusable, and a lot of the negative reviews I'm seeing are justified to a degree. But a lot of the harshest reviews talk about things that are more ugly messes than actual horrible design mechanics. So even though they're basically the same thing, let's talk about. There are tons of unattractive qualities to Batman Dark Tomorrow, and I don't mean just graphics. Honestly, graphics weren't a big issue for me at all in this game. Alongside the ugliness that was already spoken in these reviews, I found personal disgust in the lack of complexity, or better yet, the execution of complexity is just gross. The main issues critics had were the camera controls. Dark Tomorrow takes still camera shots and sets them up around the world in the game. So other than the first person mode when you activate those night vision goggles in Batarang, the cameras for main gameplay are already set, and you can't control them whatsoever. Basically classic Resident Evil camera settings, but RE makes the camera a staple in the series, adding to that horror aspect of the survival horror. Alongside its tank controls, RE makes use of less complex systems for the player and makes it a complexity, where Batman Dark Tomorrow takes all of that and just makes controlling Batman uncomfortable. Running through tight corridors becomes strange sometimes, losing my direction, and larger areas can fill you with panic if you can't see where the enemies exactly are shooting you from. The angles change way too often, which is understandable, but swapping between 3 camera angles almost every enemy encounter is just frustrating. It's making me miss hits or get hit unfairly. It's not horrible enough to make you hate your play experience though. I know I can just shit on its entirety, but most of that was a mix of my truth and the negative review scores. In reality, if you have spatial awareness and don't rush every enemy you avoid, you can avoid unhealthy fighting tactics. And the camera angles are horribly placed, but you won't die too often as a cause of it. The critics were justified in disliking it, but blew it out of proportion since, let's be real, they probably were pretty bad at this game. This lackluster camera angles also plays into the boss fights, so now I can finally talk about them. The boss fights in Batman Dark Tomorrow can be so bad they aren't even cheesily fun. After fighting Black Mask and taking down the ventriloquist and Scarface, you progress into Arkham Asylum since Batman got notified of prisoners and villains starting trouble and escaping. It's Arkham Asylum where we get to fight Ratcatcher, Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, Zsasz, and the Joker. I was surprised at the slight variety they had lined up with some of the popular and more iconic Batman villains, down to 2 or 3 more obscure ones, which was also really nice. But what was not nice at all were how these bosses actually fought. Every single boss is utterly horrible to play against. Most of the fights you just have to throw hands with them and knock their health bar down. They failed to give you any hints on how to defeat them, and the developers thought it would be silly, quirky, and cute to give Killer Croc an instant kill. After going through the sewer, you fight Ratcatcher. He has a couple of giant rats, and you bend over and kick them until they just die. Then Ratcatcher just gives up. Soon after the sewer, you adventure through a flooded Arkham basement and find Killer Croc, who traps you in a half-flooded room to try and kill you. This boss fight put me through the ringer. The water level makes Batman move like molasses, and again, Killer Croc can kill you quickly, almost instantly sometimes. He grabs your neck, throws your head down to the water, and goes to drown you. You can kind of break free, but they did not give me any insight into how, so multiple times I just had to let him suffocate me, and I didn't even enjoy it like I normally would. He also looks just ugly. Whoever designed Killer Croc as a middle-aged dude with scales on his head was out of their mind. The model of his body has no depth or real shape, and he just looks uninspired. Safely, I could say the absolute worst Killer Croc design I've probably ever seen. But he did teach me something. 2 hours into this game, I learned that the running kick is a knockdown move that can stagger opponents, even the bosses. So poor Killer Croc was subjected to my flying kick again and again and again and again until eventually knocking him clean cold. After the fight, we unflooded the asylum, and not soon after, we treaded through tons of greenery. Hell yeah, I'm talking about Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy's boss fight honestly made me the most upset, and not for the difficulty spike, but the fact that my second attempt fighting her, I had her in what basically was a stun lock combo the whole fight. So she didn't attack, didn't say a word, nothing. She really took it like a champ. I later realized I found a usable item early on in that level that would be an air canister to sedate her, I guess, which is how the asylum workers normally keep her in her cell, but I didn't use it at all. I bashed my way through it. Mr. Freeze was a pretty cool fight, coming out probably less than 10 minutes after the Poison Ivy one, but as cool as Mr. Freeze is, he suffered the same fate as Killer Croc. Whoop ass. Then in a random storage room, Zaz appeared, and all I could say for him was, hey, he tried alright. But we made it this far into the asylum, and this is where we really get to see why we took this mission seriously. Cause the next room was Jim Gordon. He was trapped here, and we can finally save him. But why was he trapped? Of course, from the one and only Joker. The Joker is in this game, and funny enough, he is not the main villain. Joker's fight is more about protecting Jim Gordon and less about fighting Joker. Actually, we don't fight him at all. He just stands and watches us as we fight a bunch of his henchmen that see Joker as their king. The bosses were on brand this game, but very watered down. The Joker does the laugh and does the goofy movements, but he lacks in the maniacal department quite a bit. While the other bosses honestly felt like side characters, with Mr. Freeze being one of the only decent ones. It truly sucks, since the bosses are usually the highlights for me and many others in superhero games. I find it to be one of the most important elements into bringing already established characters into such an engrossing media. Video games can be essential for adding life into characters that only have seen time on paper. So I'm sad to say that the ones in Batman Dark Tomorrow are just dull. These boss fights also emphasize just how infuriating this game is for no reason unless you can be cheap with your moveset. And it goes to show how repetitive the game is too. In between the boss fights, you do get some decent cutscenes, but the majority of the time is spent fighting basic enemies and running through the same hallways. This game is quite literally a hallway simulator, which is one of the most boring things you could do to gamers. Game Informer was always a trusted magazine source for gaming news for me growing up, and they actually gave this game a .75 out of 10. The reviewers hated this game, and unfortunately I can agree with a lot of their statements. But I don't give this game less than a 10% score at all. I think funnily enough, there are a good amount of things to enjoy about Batman Dark Tomorrow. So after all the bad and the ugly out of the way, we can actually talk about the good in Batman Dark Tomorrow comes in waves. This category definitely isn't the great, so keep in mind everything I'm saying that's good doesn't mean I love it, but I like it. Like if I'm eating a Snickers bar and it drops in my lap, it's still good. I mean, we'll all still eat it. First off, the composition, while a little generic in the modern age, for the time and for the atmosphere, it's super fitting. Never really any pieces that stood out to me boldly or made me emotional, but the composer truly did his work, and should be proudly stated as one of the highlights of this entire game. The cutscenes, like I mentioned several times before, are surprisingly fun. They have fairly decent animation, and it moves the story along at a really good pace, making an understandable action-adventure. It allows the story to be understood, which is more than enough and better than a lot of games at the time, who opted for boring in-game cutscenes. I much prefer the ones they chose for Dark Tomorrow since it feels like they added way more effort into the game with the cutscenes alone. They can be unironically comical though. Batman replies abruptly as he does, and of course the characters are dramatic, which makes the tones a little more cartoony than I think the game wanted it to be, but it's still effective, and it really adds to the story itself. See, Ra's al Ghul is our main villain, and he plans to take over the world to start anew as its ruler. After all the boss fights in the Arkham Asylum, we find out Ra's al Ghul is behind releasing all those villains as a distraction for Batman. Finding that out after the Joker fight and freeing Jim Gordon, we take flight and go to a snowy mountainous location, the Ra's al Ghul castle himself. After landing there was actually a horrible and very random bat glider section. Older games like to put these mini segments in all the time, but this one is controlled based off of a typical glider mechanics. So while gliding, you can dip down too to gain speed and air as you go up. But it's super clunky and feels very sluggish, so beating this mission took way too long for me. I might not be exaggerating when I say this short little 1 minute section, this 1 minute mission took me over an hour and 30 minutes.
What? No, I did not hit that. I didn't hit that. I was doing so good.
But after that, we can actually get to dive through outside his castle, fighting enemies along the way to reach the demon himself. Eventually, we make our way through the long repetitive castle grounds, and after all of we learned throughout this whole adventure, we meet Ra's al Ghul himself, and he challenges us to a sword fight. Which, I ain't gonna lie, I found super cool. After playing through the entire game hand-to-hand combat, having a sword was just hilarious. But the boss fight played pretty similarly to all the rest, but 100% the best part in the game. This is where I found out the bold decision the developers made. The ending is not one and done. There are multiple endings to Batman Dark Tomorrow. They do not allude to this at all, by the way, but you can achieve several bad endings and only one good one. If you can't beat Ra's al Ghul in the sword fight, you get not only the game over, but an entire cutscene of the demon essentially stabbing Batman, leaving him for dead as he watches the demon activate the bomb, flooding the world and cleansing it for himself. Another ending leaves Batman winning the fight, but Ra's al Ghul still activating the bomb to flood the world right in front of Batman. That is the ending I unfortunately got. Or the ending where Batman doesn't win the fight, gets stabbed, but when Ra's al Ghul activates the bomb, it appears to be sabotaged by Batman, but only if the player found the hidden deactivation area before the boss fight, which was not told to anybody at all. Then Batman dies and Ra's al Ghul blows up the world the next day. And finally, the good ending, where if you did deactivate the bomb before entering the final boss fight, Ra's al Ghul can't set it off and he turns on a self-destruct system for the whole castle. And they all escape with the world being saved. So basically, what the hell did I just play? I absolutely hate that the good ending is stuck behind finding a room that I didn't know I could enter. I can guarantee you the people that beat this game, if they even did beat it, they most likely got the bad ending, the one I did, winning the fight but losing the war. What a strange way to end an entire game, leaving my feelings mixed and my heart heated. With that being said, the story isn't that bad. I know it ended poorly in a way, but it was executed decently, which made the game worth it to play through. Without the story, Dark Tomorrow would feel like another poorly developed beat 'em up. So I'm thankful for the vision they made, even if it's not a masterpiece. There was so much bad done to this game, but still plenty of good ideas. Earlier I did mention the camera controls and how they are treated like Resident Evils, and also earlier I talked about how this game tells you nothing. These points might sound like negative attributes, but it actually makes up for what I like about this game. See, what the developer doesn't tell you is that this entire game is essentially a Metal Gear Solid clone with Resident Evil camera angles. Batman Dark Tomorrow labels itself as an action-adventure game with some stealthy elements, but the stealth system is bigger than what they explain. Distracting enemies, stealth takedowns, hiding behind corners, these are all in the game, and not once do they mention how useful they can be. For my first half of my playthrough, I went with the mindset of action-adventure, and found myself progressively shifting towards that slower, more stealth-like approach to my gameplay. I mean, not entirely. I can't control the random rooms full of enemies, where my only option is to brute force my way out. But the hallway simulator, it's not just running through a maze to get to the end. It's a Batman game, moving through a world full of criminals without being all loud and dramatic. It does have that Batman charm. I mean, you don't kill the people you fight, you always handcuff them for the police, or sneaking through the corridors behind walls to see if there's any opportunity to eliminate an enemy with the batarangs before engaging in 3 bad guys next to them. It has some of these elements of strategy like this, which made me come back to this game easily. And as I got better with handling my combos and using the limited amount of gadgets I had, I found it easier as time went on. This is not a good game by any means. I understand the criticism it faces, but after my experience with it, being patient with learning how to play, and then finally beating it, I can say the negative reviews are extremely overdramatic. The camera angles are bad, but can add to the world, making you curious about what's next and then forcing you to use your spatial awareness. The combat's repetitive, but simple once you can figure out how to fight efficiently. Batman Dark Tomorrow is rated as possibly the worst GameCube games ever, and possibly the worst Batman one too. It is full of flaws and inconsistencies, but it left me feeling sorry for the game instead of just hating it. We like to take these negative receptions and let them form our opinions for us. But how can you truly have a solid opinion on a piece if your only experience with it was from someone else's words? The game makes you work, and it makes it difficult for you. But as it chips away at you, you chip away back, learning and getting better and better. I never thought I would be relating a giving and taking relationship to a bad video game, but it somehow applies here. All I'm saying is if you give the worst rated GameCube game some time of the day and a little bit of heart, then I can promise you it'll try and give it back to you. So next time you hear how bad a game is, especially older games that can be looked at differently now, take a second to think about what it has, what it was trying to be, because it might change your perspective on it entirely. My name is Roxx, peace and love, I'll see you next time.